Welcome back to another explainer. Today we're unpacking a piece of invisible tech you probably rely on literally every single day without ever really thinking about how it actually works. I'm talking about the eSIM inside your smartphone. It feels perfectly seamless to us, right? You scan a code and boom, you're immediately connected. But hiding right beneath that smooth, simple experience is a massive, highly technical architectural evolution. Okay, let's dive into this and uncover exactly how the telecom industry pulled off an absolute masterclass in re-engineering to get this technology into our hands.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by looking at the initial leap from machines to humans. Then we'll break down the three major paradigm shifts that made this transition possible: user consent, cryptographic trust, and true interoperability. And finally, we'll wrap up by looking at the consumer eSIM revolution as a whole. We're going to see exactly how a highly technical telecommunication specification completely transformed our daily digital connectivity.
All right, part one, from machines to humans, rethinking the architecture. As we'll see, this was actually built for silent machines, not people. You know, the big secret most people don't realize is that the original eSIM architecture wasn't actually built for us. It was entirely built for silent passive machines. Let's clarify our core terms here. In the telecom world, the original standard is known as SGP.02. This is a machine-to-machine or M2M standard. It was engineered for things like, say, smart utility meters on the side of your house, or shipping trackers on massive cargo containers, devices that just sit there and do their job, no human interaction required. But eventually, the industry realized they needed to put eSIMs into our cell phones, and that led to a totally new specification, SGP.22. This is the consumer standard, built from the ground up for smartphones and highly active human users. So this brings up a massive engineering problem. I mean, think about it. How do you take a system meticulously designed for a relatively simple captive fleet of smart meters and rebuild it to work for billions of highly complex smartphones operating dynamically across hundreds of different global networks? You can't exactly just release a quick software patch for that, right? To solve this, the telecom industry had to literally tear the foundation down to the studs and rethink the whole shebang. Let's move to our first major shift and see how this builds out: user consent, decentralization, and local control. Now, what's really interesting here is the complete flip in who is actually in charge of the device. Under the old M2M standard, a back-end network system, called the SMSR, silently managed the profile's lifecycle. The device itself was totally passive. It had no user interface, zero consent gates. The operator was essentially always right. But when you move to human consumers, well, that becomes a huge liability. You absolutely cannot have an operator silently swapping carrier profiles or remotely wiping a smartphone without asking the owner. So SGP.22 introduces the Local Profile Assistant, or LPA. Think of the LPA as your phone's personal bouncer. It lives right there on your device and forces explicit user authorization for every single operation. The trust boundary fundamentally shifted from the operator backend is always right directly to the user is the final authority. This was absolutely crucial for consumer liability and fraud protection. And this on-device bouncer doesn't just block unauthorized changes. It gives you, the subscriber, total local visibility and control over your connection. Through the local user interface, you can actually see your profile's metadata. That means you can give your eSIM a nickname or assign it a specific icon. When you tap to execute commands like enable, disable, or delete on your screen, those are user-initiated operations. And this right here, this is the exact technical magic that makes the dual SIM experience on your phone possible. You can switch back and forth between your personal and work eSIMs locally, instantly, without needing a slow, cumbersome network round trip to your carrier's servers. A real game changer. That brings us to Shift 2, cryptographic trust, and upgrading security at scale. Handing over local control to the user naturally demands a much more sophisticated security framework. To understand how they upgraded security for millions of smartphones, we kind of have to demystify the back-end cryptography for a second. The old M2M model relied on something called a pre-shared key. This key was provisioned onto the chip right at the manufacturing plant. It's essentially a single shared secret between the device and the server. But if that key gets compromised or leaked, you have a massive disaster on your hands, because doing a fleet-wide key rotation is incredibly painful operationally. You just cannot do that with a billion different smartphones. So the SGP.22 consumer standard upgraded to a full public key infrastructure, or PKI model.
Now Essential Authority, the GSMA certificate issuer, dynamically signs certificates for the different components. We moved away from rigid shared secrets to dynamic mutual TLS with per-entity certificate chains. If one entity gets compromised today, you simply revoke their specific certificate without bringing down the entire global ecosystem. It scales securely to hundreds of millions of consumer devices without needing a centralized secret database. Furthermore, this new framework established a really critical consumer safety net. In the old M2M world, if the network path to the server was unavailable, the device was completely stuck. No profile switch was possible. For a smart meter, that's not a huge deal. But for a person traveling abroad or trying to run their business, a total loss of connectivity is completely unacceptable. SGP.22 fixes this. Through what are called profile policy rules and specific fallback logic, the device can retain a fallback profile. If a remote operation fails, or if your primary profile is disabled without a new one ready, your phone won't get completely bricked from the network. It's a vital layer of resilience designed specifically because human users are dynamic, whereas machines were assumed to display static single-profile behavior. All right, on to Shift 3, true interoperability and breaking the operator bottleneck.
This final shift is all about how the technology evolved to allow you to easily buy an eSIM from absolutely any provider in the world at a moment's notice. To achieve this multi-operator interoperability, the back-end architecture needed serious remodeling. The old M2M standard utilized that heavyweight back-end element we mentioned earlier, the SMSR. This acted as a single network choke point that was tightly coupled to one specific operator relationship. That is a massive roadblock for a competitive consumer market. So, under SGP.22, that heavyweight SMSR function is essentially eliminated. An upgraded element called the SMDP+ absorbs the profile generation and secure download tasks directly to your device. Decoupling these roles and removing that single network choke point drastically reduced back-end infrastructure costs and complexity, allowing the whole system to finally handle massive consumer scale. Now, because they eliminated that old, tightly coupled back-end routing, they needed a brand new way for your phone to know when a new eSIM was actually waiting to be downloaded. Enter the SMDS, or Subscription Management Discovery Server. This provides a standardized event registration and push model. Basically, it acts as a lightweight broker. This means your phone's local profile assistant can easily pull this server to discover pending profile downloads, completely regardless of who your current home carrier is. This specific mechanism is what enables true multi-operator interoperability. Any compliant backend server can be discovered by any compliant phone, which is absolutely critical for that super convenient buy an eSIM from any provider travel use case we all love.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how this universal standard actually reaches your hands. You've probably scanned a QR code at an airport to get data on vacation, right? Well, when you scan that QR code, your phone's camera is actually reading a standardized activation code string that follows 4 exact steps. First, it reads LPA1, which identifies the standard. Second, it locates that vendor-agnostic SMD plus backend server. Third, it reads a matching ID to find your specific securely generated profile. And fourth, it reads an optional object identifier. This highly testable vendor-agnostic format is exactly why scanning an eSIM QR code just works across literally any phone and any operator combination today. It replaces cumbersome back-end provisioning with a perfectly seamless universal user experience.
Finally, let's look at the consumer eSIM revolution, putting it all together, marveling at the sheer scale of this engineering feat. So, the crucial point is that SGP.22 wasn't just some minor update. It was a total re-architecture held together by 3 fundamental components. First, decentralization through the on-device local profile assistant, which forced explicit user consent and local control. Second, cryptographic trust, replacing rigid factory-installed shared keys with a dynamic, revocable public key infrastructure to securely handle millions of consumer devices. And third, standardized interoperability through discovery servers and universal QR codes, which completely shattered the single operator bottleneck. These 3 components systematically transformed a system built for a captive, invisible fleet of smart meters into a massive, fiercely competitive global consumer ecosystem. It is honestly fascinating to realize just how much complex, hard-fought infrastructure sits silently in our pockets, doing all the heavy lifting so our digital lives can remain completely frictionless. It really makes you wonder, if eSIMs evolved this dramatically, overcoming these massive technical hurdles just to seamlessly connect our smartphones to cellular networks, what invisible technology will they transform next? We might just be scratching the surface of a truly hyper-connected world. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive, and I'll see you on the next explainer.